All righty, good Tuesday afternoon. Welcome into the Chico Borman Show here on the Big Play Sports Network. Always great to have you along. And, of course, as we've been talking about yesterday, we talked a lot about the Brownies opening up with the big win against the Bengals. But I've been telling you, Tuesdays during the season, the bald breakdown. This guy certainly is no stranger to anybody out there. But Nick Shook, NFL.com, NFL Network. Bowman, you're supposed to play that already. But that's okay. Go ahead and fire that. There, look at that. The bald breakdown will come your way every Tuesday beginning at noon right here on the Big Play Network. I am bold, Nick, bald, and this will be a breakdown of epic proportions, or at least we hope. Nick Shook, so awesome to have you here in studio, and we're going to have you here each and every Tuesday. You and I go back a ways, back to our radio days about a decade ago. We've had you on this show many times. I've had you on my show many times. This will be each and every Tuesday, basically talking Browns and going around the NFL. It is great to have you.
It is fantastic to be here, sir. Two bald guys who are avoiding the glare of the sun right now to the benefit of the cameras and to the benefit of everybody everywhere, except for those watching online.
I thought you were the bald.
I mean, do we need to feel that? Like I can.
Well, no. It's bald.
Shine it up a little bit.
Yeah, it's bald. We're both bald, and that's okay. We're proud of it. We're happy with. As Bohm said, I think Michael Bohm, producer extraordinaire, he's like, well, if you guys think about it, I mean, it's kind of on brand. You guys talk about like your bald heads lifting weights, and just you guys are meatheads. I don't want to throw you into that. Yeah,
no, it's fine.
Yeah, we're meatheads.
I prefer to be interpreted as a meathead. And then I'm like, well, what do you do for work? And I'm like, oh, I write. And they're like, what do you write? Like, are you a copywriter? And it's like, well, that would be impressive, yes. But no, I'm an actual writer.
You're so articulate.
Oh, if I don't stumble over my words half the time.
That's right. That's right.
Well, God.
There was no stumbling out of the gate. Now, yesterday on the show, it was, I was gushing. I'll admit. Bohm, you were here. Nick, I was gushing about the Browns' 24-3 win to open the season over Cincinnati on Sunday. And I think the reason, more so than just the win, Nick, which for the Browns on opening day and at home is a big deal. But I said yesterday, I felt like if there's a way that you want to see them win right out of the gate, not that we get picky, but we can here, is to see that defense dominate. Jim Schwartz, new defensive coordinator. Andrew Berry had a long checklist of things to do, things to take care of on the defensive side of the ball. Checked all those boxes, but in the end, it was about, okay, we got to get out there and see these guys play. Now, the offense, I don't want to say the offense looked clunky by any means, but, weather elements, whatever. But if I'm going to have a Browns victory play out like it did on Sunday in a 24-3 score, I'd much rather have that where we feel very, very good about the transition to Jim Schwartz and the added personnel. I feel like the offense can come together. If Cincinnati, even with the great offense, had lit it up, I think people would be a little, oh boy, is it going to be? It was every bit as advertised on Sunday.
That speaks to the damage that has been done to this fan base, and I think this franchise's reputation over the last few years.
We're both very aware of that.
How the defense has performed. I don't think anybody expected the way that they played on. I didn't. I was certainly shocked. I thought that, year to year you might have a little bit of an improvement because you change your scheme and you bring in some different guys in the front four. But this is drastic. This was a completely different group with some of the same guys doing much different jobs and playing much better football. You had Grant Delpit flying all over the field. That was the first guy that was on top of my list. Leads the team in tackles, but he's flying all over the field. He's making multiple key third down stops, tackling guys short of the sticks in important moments. And then it extended beyond there. MJ Emerson, who I think is maybe even this year going to prove that he's the best corner on this team, had a good game.
Whoa.
Yes, we're going there right now.
See that first word? It's bold, bald breakdown.
That was bold.
That's bold.
This is bald.
I like that.
And this is the breakdown.
I mean, Denzel Ward, obviously. Greg Newsome, obviously. But Nick Shook says possibly by the end of the year, MJ Emerson, the best corner in that secondary.
Especially if they continue to lean on man coverage like they did. Now, it was less than 50% in that game, but it was more than you'd seen in these matchups last year under Joe Woods. So I thought he was one of the guys that played a great game. Denzel Ward also played a great game. A pass interference penalty that, whatever. Greg Newsome was solid. But what really impressed me more than anything was the pass rush. The front four and the front seven doing a good job of getting after Joe Burrow with different looks. We all have seen the Myles Garrett crossover clip as he's lined up.
It
over
is
the
pretty
center
badass, I must say.
Yeah, you know what? The problem with the clip is you don't show the end of the play. It just stops when he gets around the center. Show me the full play. I want to know what happened.
Yeah.
That's my pet peeve with that. But this whole group, moving Myles Garrett around, getting creative, getting Zadarius Smith involved, getting all these additions that you made, they all made an impact. And I think, in week one, often you're going to get defenses are ahead of the offense, right? It's just the way it goes. It's like in baseball, kind of similar imbalance early in the year. But what I've seen this first week in the NFL is telltale signs of defenses that have the potential to be great and defenses that are probably going to be average. And for too long in Cleveland, you never saw signs of a defense that could potentially be great. You could call it hyperbole. You could say I'm overreacting, but I watched the Jets last night, and I saw the push that they got up front. I watched the Packers against the Bears, and I saw how they got after Justin Fields and made him uncomfortable all day. And I saw the same thing with the Browns and the way that they affected that Cincinnati offensive line. I'll tell you what, for all the money they spent on Orlando Brown, I'm probably not feeling too good about it right now.
He's Nick Shook, NFL.com, and, of course, NFL Network. And speaking of the NFL Network, I want to let the folks know when you were doing the predictions and, with Siciliano and the entire gang, and it was Bengals. This guy right here, bold, bald, beautiful, Nick Shook said,
wow.
I'm going with the Browns.
He called me beautiful.
I called you beautiful.
Yeah,
that prediction was beautiful.
Yeah, and the Browns did what every social media team's done in the last year and a half. When they win a game that some experts don't think they're going to win, they post a screenshot. Our YouTube traffic is through the roof with these game preview predictions. And I deliver them. I delivered that, mind you, not last week, the week before.
Wow.
Yeah, we got that out of the way quickly.
Okay, so let me throw this then to you. If Joe Burrow has a quote-unquote normal ramp-up to the season and he doesn't have that calf injury, are you still going with the Browns on Sunday? And I know hindsight 2020 and all that good stuff, but
yeah,
I think so too.
And I don't know why. I couldn't really tell you why, because as somebody who grew up here and spent many a Sunday in that stadium over there, I have seen the Browns lose games in every fashion, and especially the home opener. The season opener, the home opener, every year. It's been bad. Well, I had a weird feeling. I had a very strange feeling that Burrow, whether he was fully healthy or not, something about this team had a different attitude to it. You can see it in the preseason a little bit, just the way they carry themselves. Now, I was surprised to hear, the broadcast team talk about how Kevin Stefanski and the energy in the building was different, because that's, it's week one stuff. It's optimism season stuff. But I just felt good. I felt good. I feel even better about picking the Browns this week.
And we're going to get to that. Browns and Steelers here coming up in just a bit. Again, the Bold Bald Breakdown, our debut edition of the Bold Bald Breakdown. It can be a tongue twister, but not if you're a grizzled. I almost said sizzled.
I was just going to call you 2 for 2 on that. Man. You still get the high five.
All right. Bold Bald Breakdown. I am Chico Borman. He is Nick Shook. And we're going to do this each and every Tuesday from noon until 1. We do have the Browns and the Steelers. We're going to talk much more about that here as the show moves along. But, Nick, one of the things, and you touched on it there in the open, it wasn't just about Myles Garrett. Like, I tweeted out last week that Joe Burrow has been asked in the lead up to the game last week, and I think even last season, hey, why do you struggle against Cleveland? Why are you 1-4? What do you? And he just immediately didn't even waste any time. He's like Myles Garrett, not to. I don't think he was trying to slight anybody else, but he's like Myles Garrett. The truth of the matter is, for certainly last year, the last couple of years, I'm not saying he doesn't have help defense as a whole, but Myles Garrett had 16 sacks. The next guy was what? Taven Bryant with 3? Taven Bryant. Like, go win some money at your local watering hole, for God's sakes, people. Taven Bryant was next in line after Myles had 16 sacks last year. It was Taven Bryant who was next with 3. I mentioned that Andrew Berry made a point to go out and beef up the interior of that line, but also get help for Myles. On the other side was Zadarius Smith, and pretty much we talked about it. They talked about it on the broadcast and after the game. The first play of the game, you saw it. Even Myles was like, who the hell got back there so fast? Zadarius Smith. That's the big difference heading into this year, and certainly we saw it in week 1.
Give you a little bit of insight here. I tweeted that this morning, courtesy of the fine folks over at Next Gen Stats. 11 combined pressures between Myles Garrett and Zadarius Smith. No other Browns rusher had more than 1. That is the tandem that you envisioned when you signed Jadeveon Clowney and didn't get it because he was hurt too much. That is the tandem.
Was he really hurt, or he just didn't like to
practice?
Well,
the end of the year, he was disinterested.
Just don't like to practice.
Yeah. Well, I don't like
I'm
to be
a
moved
veteran.
around. I don't like to be sacrificed in favor of trying to get this guy Defensive Player of the Year. You know how Myles Garrett wins Defensive Player of the Year? By being so damn good on your side that it doesn't matter that they're moving you around. It doesn't matter that Myles Garrett is over there getting one-on-ones because you're commanding the attention. You're commanding as much attention as Myles Garrett. That's how he wins Defensive Player of the Year, not by moving you over into the double teams. They're always going to double Myles Garrett. They're going to chip. They're going to do everything they have to do to get in his way. Well, Cincinnati didn't start to do that until the second half, but that speaks to what I'm talking about. There's more than just Myles Garrett out there. Is he the best guy out there? Does he have a space rent-free in Joe Burrow's head? He does. He does.
And this is, okay, now you have the talent and, but somebody's got to be in the kitchen. Somebody's got to be, cooking everything up. Somebody's got to be the motivating force. I think back, Nick, to day 1 of mandatory minicamp. And I think it was Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. And he was asked about, first practice, whatever. And he says, I thought it was interesting that Coach Schwartz was basically, he was just standing next to the center the entire day. He just wanted to hear how we communicated. He wanted to hear what we were doing. And okay, it's mini camp. It's not, but that gives you an indication. And this isn't meant to, I want to preface all of it by saying this is never meant to throw Joe Woods under the bus. But there was just so many things lacking. And I think the players became more and more open about it as the weeks went on, and certainly after he exited, Joe Woods, that they didn't communicate. We certainly saw that after games when they would point fingers about that sort of thing. Jim Schwartz has come in here, and I know it's only 1 game, but he's come in here, and I think he's a fiery guy, which is always nice, but he's a guy that said, okay, we're going to communicate. Everybody's going to know what their role is, and, yeah, we're going to have some fun doing this. We're going to mix things up a little bit, and, again, it's just 1 game. But my, oh my, did 1 game speak volumes for what Jim Schwartz is all about, has been all about, and hopefully a microcosm of what this season's going to be on that side of the ball.
You said it yourself right there, the most important thing, having fun.
Yeah.
This group looked like they were genuinely having fun in that game on Sunday. And they looked like they were enjoying playing together instead of blaming somebody for doing something wrong. Your fault. You blew that coverage. You're supposed to be here. You have the deep third. What's going on here? They're all gathering and celebrating, fanning each other off because they're so on fire. I mean, that's the type of stuff they were doing Sunday. It was refreshing to see for, again, a team that has not done this defensively for a long time, really. And especially it's been a glaring issue in the last few years. So that is encouraging. Now, Jim Schwartz gets a lot of, I think, unfair flack because, well, he was a head coach who's just kind of, middle-of-the-road guy. Now, he's a good coordinator. You don't become a head coach without being a good coordinator. He's proven it in multiple stops. And, by the way, he wasn't that bad of a head coach. It's just that the Lions kind of got tired of not getting to the next step. And I think they've learned their lesson with that to this point. So I love the hire when they made it in the offseason. There was a few guys on that list, and Schwartz was atop it for me just because of his experience. That's what the Browns lacked in their coaching staff. Because let's look at this again. Kevin Stefanski's only been a head coach for a few years. He was an offensive coordinator under Mike Zimmer in Minnesota. Mike Zimmer is a pretty domineering figure. You don't exactly have to be in control of your team. And Stefanski has gradually, grown into that role, does it in his own way. Very different than Schwartz, but Schwartz brings that aggressiveness, that fire to the defensive side of the football that they lacked for so long. And now, it is only 1 week, but instead of getting to Monday and now Tuesday and asking what do they need to do better, where are the answers, you're looking back and saying, wow, they played a really good game. They look like a good group.
And we always talk about, Nick, we've always heard about, because we haven't seen it really here in Cleveland that much, the great defenses. Philadelphia, obviously where he's been, and all the great defenses through the years. Anytime you're talking about a great defense, you're usually talking about a great pass rush, but you're also talking about that back end and that marriage. And, I love it after games when you've had a good game defensively, when the question is, well, do you think it was because of the pass rush? Do you think they were getting home because those guys were so dominant up front, or was it because the back end they were – we'll take those problems any day of the week. And again, we saw that marriage right out of the gate with a phenomenal secondary along with those guys up front. You're just giving a guy in Jim Schwartz, as you mentioned, the ability to use everything in his arsenal. He's really, really good, but let's face it, you can only do so much with what you have. It all depends on what you have. He would say that. And this is a guy that it can be creative, has a great feel for the game, but now he's got all of those weapons in the arsenal that we often talk about on the offensive side of the ball. Jim Schwartz is just rubbing them hands together on the defensive side of the ball, saying, let's go.
Well, this is it's what I expected them to do in the offseason when they hired him, because he's a guy who likes to use a rotation up front to be able to attack, to then empower the guys in the back end. And let's consider this. Juan Thornhill did not play. And that was one of the big guys that you got in the offseason, and they still played really well on the back end. But when they threw so many resources, I wouldn't necessarily say money because they didn't spend a ton of money, but when they threw so many resources at the front seven, getting guys like Maurice Hurst and obviously Zadarius Smith, Dalvin Tomlinson, but Obo Okoronkwo, and then signing Shelby Harris, it's like, oh, they're all about the rotation. What you see happen in Philadelphia is very similar to what the Schwartz defense is going to look like. You mix in the wide nine and how he likes to move around alignments, and suddenly, you look back and think all those personnel moves were setting up to be this type of team. That was something they absolutely had to do. I think you and I probably talked about it at length back then was, look, they're not done there. They need to continue to add guys, and they did. And you're seeing the fruition of it. The thing that is going to interest me, it's a long season. How do you weather the inevitable injuries, and how do you avoid them, affecting you in your most important positions? I think that they have the depth to do it on the back end, and the front seven is deep enough right now. But talk to me in a month, and then we'll really talk about whether, they can potentially be like a top 5, top 3 defense, because they played like it on Sunday. Undoubtedly played like it on Sunday.
Bold ball breakdown on this Tuesday, week 1, and oh my, was it a week 1 to remember for Browns fans. 24-3, the defense dominant. Let's go over to the other side of the ball. It was, from a weather standpoint, I think you don't really hear coaches talk about the weather too much, but Kevin Stefanski said it was strange, I think was the word he used. He said the ball was seemingly constantly wet and heavy, and not making excuses. It's raining for both sides, but I think as far as Deshaun Watson goes, and this is why I say, and why I said at the very beginning of the show, that if this was a case where Deshaun Watson came out and looked great, yeah, we'd all be happy. But I'm glad that it's something where, Deshaun might still. I'll ask you: is Deshaun Watson the finished product that the Browns are hoping to get, or were hoping to get when they inked him to $230 million guaranteed?
No, and I think that you're never going to get that finished product when a guy takes a year and a half off.
Sure.
And has to deal with everything that he's, been involved in the off the field, in the last year. So it's going to take an acclimation period, and I think that Sunday's climate did not allow you to necessarily judge, him fairly. Now, You could say the same thing about Joe Burrow against that Browns defense, and we just spent 15 minutes talking about how great the Browns defense is. So, you take a little bit in each hand, right? But the things that I liked and the things that concerned me about Deshaun Watson real quick, very quickly, Cincinnati gets pressure on him, right? Early in the game. It immediately affects his internal clock.
Yeah.
Something that he used to do in Houston a lot early in his career was bail out of clean pockets. He'd pull his eyes down and bail out because he felt more comfortable on the outside, or at least appeared to feel more comfortable on the outside. He started to do that in that game. But the good thing is by the second half, he started to settle down. His clock seemed to speed up a little bit. He looked a little bit more comfortable. And except for that interception, which was deflected, by the way, and I've Zapruder film broke down that from the back end, the rear end zone behind him. And
He's not lying.
I've watched the angle of the ball. I have the screenshot that I could just show you right now. And I have a line drawn this way, and then I have a line drawn where it actually went because it was deflected. Now, we don't know the speed of the ball and whether it was going to get through that window or not. But what I'm saying is the interception was not as ugly as it looked on TV. Bottom line, it was a semi-risky throw, but not nearly as bad as it looked. What was bad were the dirt balls. And you talked about the wet football, the heavy football. It almost looked like it was like a slick football in almost like an oily way, just the way that neither he or Joe Burrow could handle it in those conditions. I wasn't there. I was, a few miles down the road, and it actually wasn't raining very hard there, but I know how it gets in the lake here. So you get some strange conditions out there, and I think you saw that affecting him. What I did like about him was that he was still able to improvise, get out of the pocket. He ran for that touchdown. He settled in as the game went on. He threw the touchdown pass to Harrison Bryant that really put the icing on the cake, even though I kind of hate that phrase. Ultimately, it was an up-and-down performance that's worthy of a C+ or a B-. But C's get degrees. He got his undergraduate.
Proof.
There you go.
Living proof right here. The bold ball breakdown as the Browns knock off the Bengals 24-3. Mike Chico Borman with you, and of course joined by NFL.com and NFL Network's Nick Shook, Northeast Ohio native, who, yes, proudly predicted the Browns would win on NFL Network when all of his colleagues were saying Bengals, who day, and all that baloney. This guy said, I like the Brownies.
I wasn't the last one. I wasn't the only one.
Yeah.
See, it was a small
better,
group.
but it was you and just one guy, right?
Yeah. I got to be transparent. We got 10 guys.
You don't have to. Well,
guys and gals.
We can BS on this one. You don't have to be. No, we're going to, it is, again, bold, bald breakdown, bold, bald truth. We are, it's nothing but facts here on the Breakdown Show, which will come your way, by the way, each and every Tuesday at noon right here on the Big Play Sports Network. All right. So we're going to get to some numbers that matter here in a little bit. I thought one of the ones that blew me away as far as the Bengals and Joe Burrow particularly, we say 82 yards, right? And obviously that's not good. But someone might think, wow, the weather, they probably didn't throw he threw 31 passes. 31. 82's bad whatever way you want to mix it up and roll it out, but 82 is really bad when you've thrown it 31 times. I mean, it just speaks to, again, an unbelievably dominant performance by the Browns defense and probably a guy in Joe Burrow who, I think the decision to play him was the right one.
Oh, yeah.
But at the same time, you could see the rust, and that was not a defense that you wanted to be rusty against.
Yeah, and Burrow admitted afterwards that he felt like this is what you get when you don't get a ton of prep time and you missed the majority of camp. You're not going to be on the same page. But he actually looked like he was pretty on the same page as his receivers. It's either that the ball came in short or the Browns defenders were right there to just break it up. And that's not to say that I'm going to give the Browns the overwhelming amount of credit because the conditions did factor in and the rust, like we just talked about. But what mattered more than anything was that he never looked comfortable. I just talked about how Deshaun Watson settled in. It seemed to, a little bit. Didn't have a great game, but settled in a little bit. Joe Burrow never did. To the point where he got frustrated with Zach Taylor for not going for it on fourth down, and then they essentially demanded it of each other on the next possession. And what happens? Myles Garrett comes off the edge and sacks him, emphatically kind of
and then
ruining
they just said,
day.
Let's call it a day. You're done.
Yeah, he's just despondent, helpless, absolutely helpless, just puts his helmet on the stand, behind the bench. So the 82 yards, what really it comes down to is in one stat, one number that matters, 8 targets for T. Higgins, 0 receptions. I mean, that's the type of day it was for the Bengals as an offense. I don't think they'll be that team. The Browns have their number, strangely enough, over the last few years, and especially in Cleveland, as we all know, where Joe Burrow still has not won a game in his career. But I caution that this is not going to be the Bengals throughout the season. And they're going to meet at some point later in the year. We all know when that's scheduled. And we'll find out then who the better team is. On Sunday, it was the Browns.
We're going to get a preview here coming up in just a bit with the Steelers, and of course they really took one on the chin against the Niners. Kenny Pickett probably seeing ghosts, and the ghosts are going to get bigger and meaner coming up Monday night. But a couple more things on the offensive side of the ball. One really good, one not so good. Nick Chubb was obviously, and we talk about great here. I mean, this guy just does it. Just pencil him in, Sharpie him in. He's gonna show up. He's gonna play his ass off for 4 quarters. But the one thing that I liked, and I mentioned to you about this last week on the show, that you're gonna see Deshaun Watson. From his days in Houston, he favors that shotgun formation. He favors a lot of times empty sets with no back back there with him. And so, how does Nick Chubb adjust? How does the run game adjust? Is Nick Chubb going to be a guy that, okay, he might not get a ton of carries, but is he going to be lined up in the slot? Is he going to be lined up wide? I think it was clear. And I like this about Kevin Stefanski. I think this, dare I say it, I think it's growth. Sometimes last year, I know, bold. Again, that first word is bold, Nick.
About fell out of my chair.
One thing I've noticed, and I know it's only one game, but last year at times, Kevin Stefanski, it would seem, would be stubborn. Like, you know what?
Oh, yeah.
This isn't working right now. And I know, like, a lot of times you'll say, well, at the run game, you don't want to go away from it. I'm not talking in that regard. I'm talking like, you know what? I'm going to find a way to take this square peg and get it into that round hole if it absolutely kills me over the next 3 hours. I liked how he said, you know what? This guy Chubb is doing his thing. We're going to let him eat. Let him eat, and he did, and especially late in the game, and I know it wasn't necessarily fourth quarter type, but in the second half and the third quarter, you had those 2 big runs over 10 yards. And it was, you could just feel, you could see the life go right out of Cincinnati. And that, I felt like that was Kevin Stefanski going, you know what? I'm not going to try to get cute here. We're winning the game. Our defense is playing great. The elements are kind of iffy. Let this guy do his thing. And that's exactly what he did.
The Bengals' best defensive player is a guy named DJ Reader, interior defensive lineman.
Underrated, very underrated.
Oh, yeah. And his body language, I was watching it very closely during that sequence that you just mentioned there. He is the guy that kind of gives you the indication of how they're feeling defensively. That like, he's the heart and soul of that group. He's not the only one, but as the veteran who's very good and is a passionate player, he was the previous drive. He's wagging his finger, no, and then they get the stop, and then they just pound the ball on the ground. And you looked at him, they got into the red zone. You see Reader like come up off the ground when they're real close to the end zone. I think he's like basically on the goal line at this point. And I saw the look in his face of like, man, I'm tired. Like, we're getting worn down. And I was like, wow, look at him doing this. Now, I was a little concerned because Jerome Ford fumbled early, and I just looked at the box score now, and I was like, wow, he had 15 carries? Well, a lot of them came in that time, in that where you're kind of bleeding the clock. But you rode Nick Chubb to get there. An interesting fact, though, is the fact that Browns fans, I don't know if you'll like this or not, but the 20 carry mark was not broken by Nick Chubb. And yet, they won the
18.
game.
Yeah.
They've only done that now 3 times in the last calendar year. Usually they lose those games if he doesn't break 20 carries.
And I thought part of it was, again, back to the call by Zach Taylor, and honestly, I thought it was the right call. When Zach Taylor called off the troops, or his most important soldier in Joe Burrow, it was like then the Browns said, okay, well, Nick, you take it easy, Jerome. And I think that's why you saw that. If the game is closer and maybe Joe Burrow is in there, you're probably going to have, Chubb in there as well so it just worked out that way. One quick thing before we get to numbers that matter and then move on to this Pittsburgh game coming up on Monday night. Jack Conklin, man, you feel for this guy.
Yeah.
Just got an extension last year, I believe, a 4-year extension, if I'm not mistaken. When healthy, he is one of the best at his position. Health has been a major issue, and it looks as though he's done for the year. And not only could he be done for the year, but DeJuan Jones, who Ohio State fans know, outstanding in college, a great find. Many people are saying in the draft he had an awesome preseason, did great when Conklin went down, but now it's for real every day, we think, him at that right tackle position. So how do you see that playing out up front?
Well, I mean, gutted for Jack Conklin, first off. Odd years are not his thing, just in the since he's been with the Browns. Odd years, he misses a ton of games. Even years, he plays most of the games. Now, he did sign that 4-year, $60 million extension last year. So, that's good. He'll be around. And based on how the contract plays out, they really aren't feasibly going to be able to even move on from him until after next season. So, he's going to be here at least through next season. And it sucks. It flat out sucks for him, and we can admit that. And it's, this is a guy who, like you said, one of the best in the league. When he's healthy, it's just that he has not been able to stay healthy. He's also a big guy who does Pilates, and I'm a big Pilates guy. So, fan of him there. Yeah.
I knew, Boom, you know what? I knew coming into this show that Shook was somehow going to work in Pilates. You promised your girl that you'd work in Pilates.
Well, that's an unwritten rule, my friend.
I knew it. I knew it. It reads you like a book.
Him and his wife, they do like to do Pilates here. I can tell you that for a fact. But DeJuan Jones, folks, I have not been this impressed by a tackle in his first game, called into action in the middle of a game, since probably the debut of Rashawn Slater with the Chargers. Even Penei Sewell, maybe he was in that range.
High draft picks there.
Yeah, Slater was a very good player right out of the gate, and that's what DeJuan Jones looks like. Now, the funny thing is I'm very split on him because my eyes tell me that he's doing a good job. And like Joe Thomas tweeted, yesterday, he broke down his technique and showed, this is why he's good. He stays balanced. He's got a good base. Uses his inside arm as the anchor and the outside arm to steer. Well, it helps when you're massive and your arms are extremely long. I'm watching, I think it was either Sam Hubbard or Trey Hendrickson try to rush around him, and I'm watching that clip that Joe posted on Twitter, whatever it's called now.
Yeah, I saw that one.
Yes, it was Sam Hubbard. And I'm watching where Hubbard's getting to the range of where you get engaged with someone, and DeJuan's got his arms on him already. I'm like, can you imagine? We're like, all right, I'm about to get because you try to always win the hands to the inside. That's the battle, right? Defensive lineman, you want to get the offensive lineman's hands off you. You want to win your hands to the inside so you can pivot them and you can control the situation.
He knows offensive line play. He lives for offensive line.
I do, and I could get way into the weeds here, but we're not going to. But you can't get there if his arms, it's like boxing. He's got a longer reach. He can stay on the outside and just hit you on the outside with a longer reach. It's the same thing, and he's nailing it. But he's doing it with good technique. And the interesting thing with him, and why I'm so split on him, or at least was going into this, and now I've seen enough game tape where I'm starting to think, well, maybe my concerns were overblown. He's huge to the point where you worry about. He's 6'8", 350, so you do start to worry about conditioning, right? But he handled the job well. He dominated at the Senior Bowl. I'm at his pro day and he sits out, and everyone's kind of looking at him like, why are you sitting out? He didn't even weigh in. They announced the weight. At the pro day.
They didn't have a big enough scale.
No,
he's a mountain of a man.
So they give you the measurements, right? And then they go, wait, choice. And Mike Tomlin's in this group at this pro day. And he just stops and looks over and he goes, choice? Getting on him like, what do you mean you're not going to weigh in? We want to know how much you weigh.
Yep.
But all those concerns are kind of gone when you see how well he plays on the field. And in a moment like that, that's not an edge rushing group that's necessarily bad. You're not playing against a couple of rookies or something. This is a Bengals team that they wanted to focus on it more in the offseason, but they do have Trey Hendrickson there. And Sam Hubbard, former Ohio State guy, up and down, but he's a good player. So that's a good test. That's a solid test. But now, what do you do when a team's able to prepare for you? What do you do? Because he's the guy going forward, and he might be the guy long term.
That's what I was going to ask you. Is that before we get to obviously Pittsburgh and obviously a lot to prepare for there? Do you think there's any question right now, whether it be Bill Callahan, Kevin Stefanski, Andrew Berry, in terms of Michael Dunn? Is there a guy on the? You don't just see tackles readily available on the free agent market, just sitting at home. Does it seem like he's done enough, and then you think they feel confident enough to just put him out there and he's going to be the guy?
Absolutely. Okay. What your alternatives are? James Hudson, which you went through that last year.
Right.
Against the same team, by the way, that you're going to be playing this week. So that's kind of a non-starter.
He played.
Yeah. And Deshaun kind of got harassed a lot in that game last year.
Yeah, you're right.
It was part of it. So, if you're talking, this is going to sound super hyperbolic, but I am going to make a bold prediction now because this is the bold ball breakdown, and that's what we do. We're bold. We're bald. We're breaking it down.
He's smooth, isn't he?
I'm making the prediction right now, literally smooth.
Yeah.
Fresh shave this morning. DeJuan Jones will be the better of the two Browns starting tackles by the end of the season. MJ Emerson and DeJuan Jones. I'm staking my claims to him right now.
Wow, Bohm, yeah, Bohm.
I mean, Jed
man,
Wills is not that great.
I see Bohm. He's on it. He's cutting that up. We absolutely got to replay that. Now, okay, so Jed Wills apparently did get an X-ray after the game because it's like probably not the medical team feels like they haven't done their job unless Jed Wills got an X-ray after the game. I like the kid. I want him to do well. I really want him to do well.
Do you know? All right, this is going to come off really wrong, but I'm going to say this anyway.
Go ahead.
Do you know how Jack Conklin got hurt? Because Jed Wills did a decent job of running Trey Hendrickson around Watson, but it was the end of that play that he got rolled up on. That happens. He actually did a pretty solid job. But if I had to pick a left tackle to stake the future of my franchise to, it's not Jed Wills. I'm not saying DeJuan Jones is going to be your left tackle.
Right.
I'm just saying this year, by the end of the year, you'll see that your right tackle is better than your left tackle.
Wow. I mean, that not everything's going to be perfect, okay? And you lose Jack Conklin, hopefully DeJuan Jones. We feel good about DeJuan Jones, but, I mean, Jed Wills on a list of many different, concerns, questions, storylines heading into the season was one of those. Like, okay, hey, he has an opportunity to get paid here. I mean, Joe Thomas has come on and said it like, yeah, it's no secret. It's do or die time. It remains to be seen, and we'll see how it plays out. And, of course, also coming up on Monday night. Speaking of Monday night, well, I'll tell you what, before we get to Monday night, we've got numbers that matter for Monday night. We got numbers that matter, which we're going to do each and every Tuesday here on the Bald Breakdown.
New segment in a new segment.
That's right. How about that? Mike Chico Borman. He is Nick Shook with NFL.com and the NFL Network. Numbers that matter from the Cincinnati Bengals game. I'll tell the folks what they are. You tell them why. Why, Nick Shook? Why does the number 6 matter from Sunday's game?
6. That's the total first downs the Bengals recorded on Sunday. And I don't think it takes a math genius to tell you that's not good. Not great, Bob. To quote Mad Men. Great show. I don't think there's any further explanation needed.
Well, and we continue. I mean, this is where a lot of these numbers, shocker here, are going to have to do with Joe Burrow, his struggles, and a dominant defense. So the next number that matters, I mentioned it earlier. I'm sorry. I spoiled the surprise. 82. 82.
Well, that's a number once worn by the great Ozzie Newsome, but this does not have a positive connotation. That is, as we already know, Joe Burrow's total passing yards. But I'll pull something from my What We Learned piece on NFL.com on Sunday. Joe Burrow posted the worst completion percentage over expected of his career.
Over expected. Right, that's next level. That's geek stuff that I don't know anything about that Nick does. Yeah.
It's essentially, it takes in a number of factors and establishes a probability of completion and then weighs that over every single attempt in the game. His worst CPOE, as it's known in the next-gen stats world, of his career on Sunday. Again, it was raining, but not a good day.
And this is good. This is what you will find out if you haven't already, because, again, Nick and I have been doing, segments and shows for years and years and years. But finally, we get to do an hour-long one each and every Tuesday, which will be breaking down the previous game, getting ready for the next game, thus the Bald Breakdown. But you are stats. You're a next-gen, and which is good. I mean, that's content that the NFL.com, NFL Network, they want you to produce. So this is good. I'm going to learn a few things.
Oh, yeah. I'll give you a whole crash course here.
Yeah. CPOE is completion percentage over expected, Boom. There will be a quiz later. Before 2 o'clock, you will be asked.
I will say, I was dragged kicking and screaming into this world. I was never a math guy. I got into journalism, so I didn't have to do math. I was told there would be no math. And now I'm doing math. But I love it. All right, let's go to the next number that matters.
Okay, we had 6. We had 82. Now we have just 2. Why does that matter from Sunday?
This is another thing that I tweeted out from the fine folks over at Next Gen Stats. Those are the total completions versus man coverage on Sunday for Joe Burrow.
Not good, Bob.
2 completions for 10 yards, right? Okay. Last year, the Browns relied heavily on zone coverage and did a pretty good job against him. But the Schwartz defense, the changes visible there in the numbers. More man coverage produced fantastic coverage, blanket coverage of those receivers. in adverse conditions. So great for him.
So you mentioned the defense. You mentioned, certainly, we've talked about two guys that really matter on defense, and they mattered on Sunday. 11 is the next number that matters from Sunday. And, well, why is that?
Yeah, I kind of spoiled this one already, too. That's the combined total pressures between Myles Garrett and Zadarius Smith, 11. Myles Garrett with 6, Zadarius with 5. That's complimentary edge rushing, folks. That right there is how it's quantified. Shows up in the box score. That's what you need going forward.
This guy, I think, kind of got overshadowed by, Myles and Zadarius, but the next number that matters from Sunday's win over the Bengals has to do with this guy, so he's no longer going to go without mention. 8.
Grant Delpit's combined total tackles, leading the team in his first game under Jim Schwartz. That is pretty darn good.
He was a guy that was not shy about saying, there were basically everybody on that side of the ball. If they got a microphone and they were asked about Jim Schwartz, you heard kind of the same tone, like, man, we're having fun. He's going to let us go out there and make plays. And Grant Delpit was one of those. And Grant Delpit, we know, is as talented a player as there is in the league at his position. He really is. I don't think that's a hyperbole. Yeah. But he could really, really benefit from
I hated, how he was unfairly maligned, in my opinion. He didn't play great football his first couple of years. He also dealt with that injury, his rookie year.
A lot, yeah.
He's been through a lot, but that the talent's there, and it's nice to see him finally being unlocked. Again, long season, we'll see by the end of the year, but I really liked what I saw. That's the type of player that Browns fans thought they were getting when they drafted him years ago.
All right. When the Browns drafted this guy years ago, I think people were a little bit surprised. Not surprised that, but they didn't see it coming. John Dorsey said, I really like this running back out of Georgia. The number that matters from Sunday's game has to do with this guy out of Georgia. 18. Why does that matter, Nick?
18 was the total amount of carries Nick Chubb registered on Sunday for 106 rushing yards. And the Browns won the game, which means, hey, toss that 20-carry mark out the window, folks. That's last year's stuff.
Doesn't matter.
It's only the third win in which Nick Chubb registered less than 20 carries in a game, like I said earlier, in the last calendar year. Browns maybe starting to shift a little bit. You can lean on Nick Chubb all you want. You need to. But they can win without it if their defense plays like that, which they did on Sunday.
Okay, so today is Tuesday. And, of course, every Tuesday at noon we'll have the Bold Ball Breakdown. Tuesday is also the Players
really
Off
well.
Day.
Like you're really starting to get that down.
Well, it's
rolling off now.
I try to consider myself a professional despite what the critics say. So,
critics.
Yeah, and there are plenty of them. But as Joe Hollis, I'm going to drop a name for you. Joe Hollis, one-time Ohio State offensive coordinator in the early 90s. He said to me, he would always, this is really important. He had a profound impact on me. The offensive and defensive coordinators for Ohio State, Joe Hollis and Bill Young, knew, they could tell that I was the young pup, freshman working for WOSU, and I'm getting sound after practice. So they would make it a point to say, you know what, I'll get you in a minute so you don't have to, fight over these guys. Guys that are getting paid and they're doing their jobs. And so they always took that time. So the Buckeyes always had problems with Illinois back in the Cooper days. And, Illinois, Dana Howard, I'm going, way back with, a lot of great defensive names. But I remember asking Joe Hollis, I said, there's a lot of critics out there about, the game plan offensively is too conservative and you're kind of playing into Illinois' hands. And he goes, he's got that southern drawl, right? He's like, let me tell you something, son. Got a lot of statues out there you got a lot of guys out there with statues who have been criticized. But you know what? There ain't one statue of a critic. And I was like, I love that. And then I was like, well, now I'm so mesmerized I can't even ask my next question. Yeah. But when we talk about criticism, we talk about critiques, so now that's why the critics be damned, Not that they're going to build a statue of me anytime soon.
I'm mesmerized, but now I'm wondering, where do we fall in the critics or those being criticized?
But as far as those critics that do criticize me, you're not getting a statue either.
No, you're not.
Nah. All right, that's all right. All right, so that's it for Numbers That Matter from Sunday. We're going to put Tuesday, it's the off day. Browns back on the practice field tomorrow. This is a huge week. Yeah, every week. It is. especially with the expectations. You're coming off a 24-3 victory, enjoying it, hopefully, but back on the field tomorrow. We look ahead to Pittsburgh. And Nick, this was when the schedule came out right up until Sunday's game, and we're still saying it. Wow, 3 out of their first 4 games for the Browns against divisional opponents. Sunday, Cincinnati, Monday night, Pittsburgh, Tennessee sandwiched in between there, and then Baltimore. So I looked at this and I said, it could go one of 2 ways, being the very, smart guy that I am. I said this could work in their favor and they're able to get a jump on people, or, they kind of we're going to know right away. Well, sometimes things happen, and, Joe Burrow, they took advantage of an opportunity against a Cincinnati team that I agree with you is not where they're going to be at the end of the year, but still, nobody's feeling sorry for them. And you look at the Pittsburgh Steelers on Monday night, there were a lot of games played on Sunday that kind of raised a few eyebrows, and we'll get into that towards the end of this show. The San Francisco 49ers, it wasn't beating Pittsburgh. It was taking them behind the woodshed and beating them at Acrisure, Heinz Field,
God,
Three Rivers, whatever
so
the hell
bad.
it is. Yeah, Three Rivers, whatever.
Acrisure.
Yeah. And their defense, speaking of the Browns defense, the Niners defense dominated. So here's Kenny Pickett, excuse me. There's a receiver named George Pickens, but Kenny Pickett, right? He's just now on his off day, probably sleeping in, didn't sleep real well, nightmares seeing Nick Bosa and company. And now all of a sudden they're going to be back on the practice field tomorrow. And he's like, now I've got Myles Garrett and this Zadarius Smith, and I'm watching film of what they did to Cincinnati. This could be another great opportunity. I don't want to put the cart before the horse, but I'm just saying it could be a golden opportunity again.
I think there's some similarities. First off, what a gauntlet for the Steelers to start if the Browns defense is actually this good. Because the 49ers, folks, right now, I'll just tell you right now, all right, they are the NFC title contender that everybody expected them to be when they ended the season. Brock Purdy's awesome, by the way. I mean, he's a treat to watch. Calm, cool, collected, but we're talking about the defense here. And the defense did all that to the Pittsburgh Steelers with Nick Bosa playing like roughly 50% of the snaps because he just reported to the team on Thursday because he just signed his extension that he was holding out for so long. They're not even near their peak right now, and that's how good they were. Fred Warner went all over the field against them in this game. He was stuffing run lanes left and right, and they were harassing Kenny Pickett, which sounds a lot like what the Browns did to the Bengals on Sunday. And I think that there's a lot of similarities between these two teams and the personnel groupings that they have. I look at the guys who registered sacks in that game for San Francisco. Kerry Hyder, formerly of Detroit Lions fame. Javon Hargrave. Nick Bosa is not even in that group, not listed there for a sack in that group. Some of the household names that you expect are not in that group. That's kind of what the Browns should be. Myles Garrett's going to get after you. They're going to dedicate extra blockers to him, and they're going to try to take him out of the game. But this is when Zadarius Smith steps up. This is when Dalvin Tomlinson steps up, and Shelby Harris, and the rest of that group that we just talked about. Maurice Hurst, you go all the way down the list. All those guys are going to be extremely important because I think it's going to be really hard to do the same thing to the Pittsburgh Steelers in back-to-back weeks when their roster, as we see it, is good enough to go win games and not get beat by 23 points at home to open the season. Now, the problem, though, is this. Browns got to get to Kenny Pickett real quick because what Pittsburgh figured out in that game was let's stop trying to take the shot. The whole offseason they talked about we're going to stretch the field. We got George Pickens. Kenny Pickett's going to let it rip.
Good luck with a deep drop against the Browns front.
Deontay Johnson gets hurt. George Pickens is kind of a non-factor, although he made a great catch out of bounds. It didn't count. This offense did not, become a well-oiled machine. But once they figured out if they shorten the game, that they could move the ball, that was his best throw of the day. Probably one of his best throws was to Pat Freiermuth in the end zone for a touchdown where he put it in a spot that only Freiermuth can catch it. I was blown away that it wasn't broken up. So the Browns got to get after him quick. They cannot allow him to throw short passes. That's going to be the formula of this game, kind of similar to what they did against the Bengals on Sunday.
And the Steelers, we talk about Kenny Pickett struggles on Sunday. Obviously, the offensive line, it goes without saying. Burrow didn't play well. The offensive line didn't play well. And, again, you credit the Browns defense. But that offensive line for the Steelers, which, by the way, I know you talked about basically a whole new linebacking core, which we'll get to that defense here in a moment. But the offensive line needed some adjusting. They needed some new personnel. And, well, they went through the draft. They added a run mauler. But, man, they could not keep up, obviously, as far as that rush. Kenny Pickett was sacked 5 times in this game. He was hit 10 more times. I mean, he is feeling it on this off day. He's probably a little gingerly walking up those stairs at his house. I think this is probably one of those situations. I mean, talk about numbers that matter. Dan Moore Jr., I don't mean to pick on the guy, but for crying out loud, Pro Football Focus, you know those guys very well. They do the rankings each and every week. And they ranked 75 offensive tackles from this week's games. Dan Moore Jr., who is their starting right tackle that I think had to move over to left, if I'm not mistaken, at some point in the game, but regardless, is a tackle for the Steelers, ranked 75th out of 75 tackles. I'm not the sharpest knife in the drawer, Nick. You know that. But
wait a minute, you just said you called yourself a smart guy, and I agree with that more than the dullness of your knife there. But
yeah. Both is true.
Critics.
Both can be true.
Critics.
Yeah. Critics. There ain't no statues of those critics. Dan Moore, that's not good. That's also not good, Bob.
Yeah, no, not at all. That's the type of grade you get when you let Drake Jackson get around you for 3 sacks. Drake Jackson, nice guy at USC, quiet year. His first year in the NFL. Came onto the scene with a storm like gangbusters in week 1. And a lot of it was because he was facing a guy like Dan Moore, just beating him around the edge. And I think that speaks to what is also the strength of the Browns defense, which is that they don't just have one guy. You know, they got a number of different guys that you can focus on. And if you find yourself isolated against a tackle in a one-on-one situation and the rest of the offense is worried about maybe sliding the right or bringing a guy to chip to the opposite side where Myles Garrett is, well, guess what? You got Zadarius Smith or somebody else right there lined up for a one-on-one there. So, again, that's why the short passing game is going to matter the most in this game, because the only way you can neutralize pass rush is by getting the ball out.
Let's also, the other way you neutralize a pass rush is if you're able to run the ball. Najee Harris, I still think the jury's out on him. I liked him a lot coming out of Alabama, but is that, now again, this is where, is it more on the offensive line? Is it Najee? But, Jaylen Warren is a guy nipping at his heels right behind him, but that's another way that you can slow down the pass rush. Do you think that running game is something that they are, Matt Canada, their longtime offensive coordinator, and Mike Tomlin, is that something obviously they're going to try to establish? And if they do, are they successful against this Browns front seven?
Yeah, it was a weird distribution of carries between the two players because Jaylen Warren has had that type of preseason that has prompted reporters to ask, what's this distribution going to be like? And they're like, well, Najee's still our lead guy. And he should be your lead guy. He had the draft stock for that, right? And he's handled the rock a lot. He's carried a lot of the load the last 2 years. He deserves that opportunity. But I also think that last week was not a good indicator of what's to come, because if you look at the drive charts here, the Steelers went 3 and out, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times, their first 5 possessions. They went punt, interception, punt, punt, punt.
First 5 possessions, 3 and out.
In that same period, the Niners scored a touchdown, field goal, punt, end of half. You can't run the ball when you're down by that many points. So I don't think it's really a fair indicator of what they're going to do on the ground. And if they're smart, they'll try to establish the run, because there were some glimpses in that Browns-Bengals game where Joe Mixon did rip off a nice few runs. It's just that they didn't sustain anything well enough offensively to get him into rhythm. The Steelers have 2 running backs that can do that well. It's just up the offensive line, which looked good in preseason. But again, I caution, grain of salt for the preseason, because the Steelers are playing most of their starters against teams that weren't necessarily playing all of their starters. And there's a reason they looked like one of the better teams in the preseason, because of that talent difference. And now that we're in the regular season, it's a completely different story. So we'll see if they can open those rush lanes against this defense. It'll be the Browns' first test of their run defense, because if they can stop the run and force Kenny Pickett to throw and get into those man coverage situations where it's 3rd and long and you can play a little bit of press, or maybe it's 3rd and short, 3rd and 5, 3rd and 4, and you can play press with these man coverage corners that played really well in the first game.
Awesome.
Then you're in a good spot.
We've got numbers that matter coming up in just a bit for the Steelers game, but I want to flip it now. This is where, both these teams, the strength of their teams are on the defensive side of the ball. Clearly the Browns, we saw that on Sunday. The Steelers, you really didn't see it. San Francisco, you mentioned Brock Purdy, and Brandon Ayuk had a great game. Christian McCaffrey was I heard Mike Tomlin say earlier in the week, yeah, we're going to have to be very disciplined when we're in space with guys, because if we're not, he's going to burn us. Well, guess what? He burns you, as Christian McCaffrey can. That Pittsburgh defense, I think, better than they played on Sunday. But what are some things maybe that you saw San Francisco do that could translate for the Browns on Sunday at Acrisure Stadium?
It's a terrible name. Yeah, that's a good question, because like I think about how Patrick Peterson was criticized this week, and he walked himself into it by talking about how the 49ers have tails and we're going to know their plays and come talk to me when I get a pick, and then he gets burned for 2 touchdowns. But he also had some nice plays. He had a couple of really nice pass breakups over the middle. What the Browns are going to have to do offensively to try to capitalize on any of this is just establish a rhythm. You cannot be predictable. You cannot just pound the ball with Nick Chubb every play, because the Steelers, I mean, look, these are two teams that are very familiar with each other. They know what you're going to do. It's not like you just changed offenses completely overnight. You got to get a little creative. You got to get a little bit ambitious offensively. And what more than anything is you got to get Deshaun Watson comfortable. Yeah. You got to make sure that they don't get after him early and mess with his clock like they did the last game.
And you said it earlier. I mean, they're it's not like they're going to be oblivious to the news that, oh, wow, Jack Conklin's out and we got this.
No, they'll go after Dwan.
Yeah. So is that, I mean, that's a case where you're helping him out. I mean, there's only, we say about Miles, they're saying the same thing about TJ Watt.
Yeah, you want a good test? You want a good test of your new right tackle? TJ Watt, baby.
How about Alonzo Highsmith had, how many, 14 sacks last year?
Yeah, career high.
Yeah, he was, I mean, so they've got weapons on that side of the ball. All right. We got numbers that matter. Let's go with 3 numbers that matter leading into Monday Night Football in Pittsburgh. Browns 1-0, Pittsburgh 0-1, reeling from that drubbing at the hands of the San Francisco 49ers. Wow, we got a negative number on here for negative numbers. Minus 23, yeah, Mr. Shook.
Negative numbers are numbers, too. Don't leave them out. Negative 23 is the point differential in Pittsburgh's loss to San Francisco, which is the worst home loss in the Mike Tomlin era.
That's saying a lot.
Yeah. Well,
guy,
you know what?
It doesn't happen on his watch.
Browns might be running into an angry team on Monday night. Just saying.
3.9. We get decimal points in here as well. 3.9, Nick.
Decimal points they also matter. 3.9 is the average yards per play in Pittsburgh's loss to San Francisco. Again, a game that was completely thrown out of balance by an early deficit, but still.
Final number that matters for Monday Night Showdown in Pittsburgh, Browns and Steelers, 2.
2. The total interceptions thrown by Kenny Pickett in their loss to San Francisco. Twice as many interceptions as he had over his final 8 games last season.
There's been a lot of, now, are you one of those they had a great preseason. Are you one of those folks that seems to think that Kenny Pickett is, I mean, he had a bad game. They all had a bad game on Sunday. Are you one of those guys that thinks that Kenny Pickett is going to take that jump in his second year, as many, seems to be a sexy pick for that?
I think about this like we define squares and rectangles, right? What is it? A square is a rectangle, or a rectangle is a square?
Geometry, too.
I wasn't good at math, so I don't know, but one of those two is true. A jump is a jump, but if a jump is just a hop, it's still a jump, right? You're still clearing the ground and advancing forward.
Brain teasers.
I'm not saying that it's going to be huge.
Brain teasers right here.
It's not going to be massive, but it could be semi-significant. I'm a little. My expectations have been tempered a little bit after what we saw on Sunday.
So I'm not gonna, because I know you do predictions, and it is a production with NFL Network and NFL.com. So we're not gonna ask for a prediction.
Okay.
I'll just say I'll just ask you this before we get news and nuggets, and of course talk about last night's little bit of news from New York. Is this going to be a lot closer than we saw on Sunday, Browns-Bengals, and a lot closer than obviously they saw in Pittsburgh with the 49ers? Because both those games were seemingly blowouts.
Absolutely.
Much closer.
Yeah, I do think so. And I think it's going to be a fairly low-scoring affair, and it's going to be a 4-quarter battle.
I agree with you. Okay, so that is the Browns portion of our bold, bald breakdown. We got a few more minutes left here. Our debut show. And, folks, we're going to do this every Tuesday. My buddy Nick Shook, you know him, you love him.
I don't know if you love me, but
yeah, you might not love him.
Maybe.
You've got to accept him. You have no choice. Tuesday, noon to 1, we're going to be breaking down the previous game from the Browns, looking ahead as we just did with the Steelers. Each and every Tuesday, noon to 1 here on the Big Play Sports Network. Stream it at Chico Show CLE, also on YouTube. We're also, wherever you get your podcasts, go download it. and we're live on iHeartRadio. So if you don't want to see these bald heads, and I'm not gonna begrudge anybody that, but you can just hear our deep, low voices.
He just said it. You have no choice.
Yeah, you have no choice. You have to accept it. All right. I got to ask you quick about last night. The Jets, they get the victory, but at a huge, huge cost. There's rumors floating around. They're getting so crazy that, like, Warren Sharp is putting out, well, I think the Jets should make a call to the Browns for DTR.
That's a tape dog right there talking
What?
from an informed standpoint. He's watched those preseason snaps from DTR.
Is it
my
Zach
favorite
Wilson
player
or
of the
bust?
preseason? No, I think that it's hard. It's really hard. Like, I've said this before. We've talked about this at one point last year when it came to the Browns quarterback situation at the time and years prior. This is not Madden, folks. You can't just go get a guy and he knows your offense immediately from the jump. It's just that doesn't work like that.
Is fanboy Nick listening?
Now, Baker Mayfield would say otherwise.
Don't pay attention.
Because, look, he went and within 48 hours of landing with the Rams, ended up leading the victory. But that was mostly with improvisation and his grittiness that Cleveland used to love him for, right? Well, I don't think that necessarily it's going to be that easy for you to add a guy at quarterback in New York who's going to pick up the offense and establish a rapport with these receivers that Aaron Rodgers, by the way, had cultivated this entire offseason. So no matter what, you're in a bad spot. But the good thing is that defense is probably the best in the league. It's really, really, really good, okay? I was completely impressed, not stunned, but impressed by that team last night. Incredible game for them defensively to come back and win that game, that fight that they had. They're going to need that fight every week, though, because if Zach Wilson's your quarterback, steep climb.
How nervous are they in Buffalo? I mean,
Josh Allen stinks in at MetLife just like Joe Burrow stinks on the shore of Lake Erie.
Okay. All right.
Because of defense.
Sum that up. Another big blowout, and it wasn't necessarily the result, but how it happened. I love these questions. Was it more about this or that? More about Dallas being that great or the Giants being that bad? And yes, the correct answer could be both. But I want you to pick one of those. More about the Cowboys being damn Cowboys or the Giants just being, well, the Giants.
I think this is tough because I don't believe either to be necessarily true. I don't think the Giants are going to be as good as people think. I think that they'll be
bad as Giants are saying, as bad as they think.
No. As good as people thought going into the season.
Oh, okay. All right.
I think that they'll be as good as they were last year, if not worse. I just don't think that they take the next step like a lot of people anticipated. And before that Sunday night game, everyone was like, Giants, this is their year to take this. No, I don't think they're that good. But I don't think that they're that bad either to get beat 40-0, have a dynamite dropped on you in your home opener. It was not good, right? But I think a lot of that game happened in basically the span of a quarter. You have a great opening drive. You get your field goal attempt blocked and return for a touchdown, and you pretty much fall apart from there, and it just snowballs. That happens in games sometimes. So I don't think it's a good indicator either way, but I think the Cowboys are going to be there at the end of the year in the NFC race.
Quick thought on Miami and the Chargers. Wow. We talked about it being a high-scoring game. I'll be honest, I didn't think it would be like that right out of the gate. But this just in, Tyreek Hill is fast and at times uncoverable, and Tua looked pretty damn good. How about the Dolphins and are the Chargers, speaking of maybe overrated, again, what do you think?
That's a week one overreaction, I think.
Okay. All right.
And, I'm working on the QB index, as I do every week. You can find that at NFL.com/index. Promo right there, shameless plug. I'm having a hard time placing Justin Herbert and Tua Tagovailoa because Tua has always been behind Herbert. But for the first time in a head-to-head matchup, he outplayed him. Not quite to the degree that the stats indicate, because the Chargers figured out how to run the ball, something they could not do last year. They figured that out on Sunday. Tua was incredible. Tyreek Hill was incredible. This offense is as explosive as it was last year. I think they're going to win the division.
My man, we survived week one of the Bold Bald Breakdown.
Yeah, we did.
Here on Big Play Sports. Outstanding stuff.
Didn't even break a sweat.
You didn't.
No.
You didn't. I kind of did. I'm not too bad.
Well, you're over there flexing the whole time.
Well, that's not what I know.
It's isometric.
It's not nice of you. Follow him on Twitter at the Nick Shook, NFL.com, NFL Network. You probably saw last week. Wow, everybody's picking the Bengals. Not this guy. He didn't. He picked the Browns. The Browns were victorious. We're going to do this again next Tuesday, and this will be right after Monday Night Football, the Browns and the Steelers. He's Nick Shook. I'm Mike Chico Borman. I still have an hour left to work. He can go do whatever the hell he wants to do. He's probably going to look up stats and rectangles and squares and all that. We'll be back with more of the Chico Borman Show with you until 2 o'clock right here on the Big Play Sports Network. Stick around. All righty, welcome back. It is the Chico Borman Show right here on the Big Play Sports Network, and that was fun. That was a lot of fun. Now, he's a guy, Nick Shook is a guy that I've worked a lot with over the years, as I've said. I've been wanting to do something like this for a while, and but I thought I thought it was a lot of fun. Hopefully you folks out there enjoyed it. We're going to be doing it every Tuesday, beginning at noon, right here on the Big Play Sports Network and the Chico Borman Show, and it will be, as you just took in, first 45 minutes, we're breaking down, everything Browns. The previous game, the look ahead. We got the Steelers there at the end. We're going to talk more about that this hour. But each and every Tuesday, beginning at noon, the bald breakdown with yours truly and Nick Shook here on the Big Play Sports Network. All right, 216-626-7901. Also on Twitter at Chico Show CLE. You can also go over to YouTube. And if you are not already subscribed, well, please do. Type in the Chico Borman Show, hit subscribe. And now, thanks to our good buddy Warden McAllister. What's the matter, Boom? Look like you saw a ghost there. Everything all right?
I heard a noise.
You heard a noise. See, you're very observant. Could you just turn me? It's not your fault. Just turn that. There we go. All right. You can also, wherever you get your podcasts, we're streaming there, and also on iHeartRadio streaming live as well. Warden McAllister has just been on fire lately. So, again, there's how you reach us. There's how you get in touch with us. There's how you listen to this here program and this here station. Browns Steelers coming up on Monday night. It can't get here soon enough. I mean, look, I think we all felt good. I said this yesterday. I think we all felt good about Sunday's game, going into Sunday's game against Cincinnati. Sure, there's a lot of, well, what if? And that's just part of being a fan, and you're going to do that every week and certainly every season before the opener. But I think we legitimately, genuinely felt good going into that game. And I think the Browns defense, I thought that they would play well. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I thought that they would dominate to that extent. But I remember saying pregame that, I know we're all focused on Deshaun Watson, and yes, justifiably so, and he's got to be better, and I think he will be better. Elements played a part. This defense is going to be the story of this season. This defense is going to be the staple for this team for this season. And, I mean, you can't get off to a much better start than what the Browns did Sunday afternoon at Cleveland Browns Stadium. Now, and this is very important. It's not the sexy thing you want to hear. It's not, but when we talk, and I know I've said this ad nauseum, but I'm going to say it again. The great teams, the great organizations, we talk about culture, and God knows that word's been tossed around here a lot. And I've said it, we've all said it. Culture is something that you build and you do with consistent winning. So as great as that win on Sunday was, and I'm sure this is the mindset for the Browns as they get back on the practice field tomorrow. As great as Sunday was, as dominant as they were at times, particularly on the defensive side of the ball, as dominant as they were on the scoreboard, it doesn't mean anything. It's done. It's over with. And now you got another game, a huge game, and yes, another divisional game. And this is where, hell yeah, we should feel good. Hell yeah, you should feel very, very optimistic about not just the Browns this year, but yeah, the Browns this week. We didn't know how this whole thing was going to start out. We didn't know, how would Cincinnati look? How would Burrow look? How would the Browns look? Their defense, this thing's for real. This isn't something that, you have to worry, is that a fluke? No, it's not a fluke, and it's going to get better and better. Obviously, we hope that health continues for the most part, but they're going to get better and better each week. But now you've got to do it again. Last week was great. Now you've got to do it again against another division rival. And then 2 weeks from this weekend, you'll have another division rival against Baltimore, sandwiched in between there, Tennessee. But this team is feeling good. This fan base is feeling good, and they should be feeling good because that was a convincing, a statement victory, and a statement victory that we've been waiting for and we've been hearing about. But the bottom line is you can add all this talent. And again, I want to say Andrew Berry, he had that to-do list in the offseason. He knew first and foremost, I've got to beef up the interior of that line. We've got to be better against the run. And we've got to be better on the defensive side of the ball. We've got to get somebody calling the plays and the voice of the defense, and that's out goes Joe Woods, in comes Jim Schwartz. Everything they did on the defensive side of the ball paid huge dividends on Sunday, and I think it's something that you can expect throughout the season. Are they going to be that dominant? Is every quarterback only going to have 82 yards through the air? Probably not. But that's okay. And I really believe, and Bohm, I don't know what your thoughts are on this, but as I said to Nick earlier, it's not that, I'm not concerned at all about, Deshaun's going to, I want to see them. I need to see them and him specifically be better. But if this were reversed, I think I'd be more alarmed if the defense didn't come out, and not that they had to be dominant like they were Sunday, but if they didn't come out and at least look okay. And I think the idea that they came out and dominated the way they did, Deshaun will get better, the receivers will get better, the offense, the chemistry, all that will get better as the season rolls along. But the defense doing what they did, I think really gives you that bigger sigh of relief and that bigger reason to feel optimistic moving forward.
Yeah, Chico, it was almost surreal because like the way that they were able to stay so dominant for an entire game. You know, I was just waiting for at some point some like big play to happen out of Cincy. Like just the fact that they were able to completely obliterate any like window of hope for that Bengals offense was phenomenal. It was such an incredible thing to watch, and it feels good to be able to lean on that defense to step up when you need them to and give that offense another opportunity to put points on the board.
And I know this goes without saying, but I think we got to emphasize the point. When you have a defense at whatever level, but when you have a defense that pressures the quarterback, whether it's Joe Burrow, Kenny Pickett, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, doesn't matter. When you have a defense that puts that kind of pressure on the quarterback and does so from the opening snap, it totally changes the complexion of the game. Well, duh, yeah. No, but I mean, we're talking about a team, and they're not on the same page, and Burrow did miss, all that time in the preseason, but that's still Jamar Chase. That's still T. Higgins. It's still Joe Burrow. It's still Joe Mixon. It's still, when you're able to get pressure like that, I don't care how great you are and how calm you are, you're thinking like that's in your head. And, I know I brought it up a lot last week, but I thought it was, Joe Burrow talking about 1-4, now 1-5, but saying about 1-4, yeah, I mean, Myles Garrett has a lot to do with that. That's scary now when you think about Myles with all of this help that he's never had. And to marry those two units, the front seven, that secondary, and then Jim Schwartz doing what he does best, getting creative with a lot in the arsenal. These aren't just mediocre weapons. These are the best of the best at some positions. And that's really exciting. I mean, that's extremely exciting. All right, if you want to talk about it, we can do that. You can also tweet at the show, at Chico Show CLE, and on YouTube. Boy, last night, my goodness. You want to talk about a change in momentum, a change in, boom, that place was bonkers. When Rodgers comes out on the field with the U.S. flag, obviously on 9/11, and Jets fans, they've got a great team, a great defense. It was like, well, Rodgers, and look, he was the storyline all off season. Hard Knocks, we talked about that. It was Aaron Rodgers, and just how far can Aaron Rodgers take the New York Jets? So he comes out with the U.S. flag. That place is going berserk. And then 4 snaps into the game, Achilles ruptured, done for the season. Wow. I mean, I don't remember that quickly. I'm thinking here locally too, but I can't, off the top of my head, I can't think of such a huge drop in momentum like Jets fans had yesterday and that stadium had last night. From Rodgers coming out on the field with the flag to him going down. Like, it was mind-boggling to me.
Yeah, it was kind of surreal, and I was talking to a Jets fan who I happen to be fantasy teammates with, and he was just like, he was in shock, to say the least. And I mean, it was amazing to see the Jets step up and come away with the dub in that game, but man, like, if you just have to feel deflated as a Jets fan, even after a win. Like, the win still feels good going into the week. And maybe Zach Wilson showed you some, a little bit to give you some semblance of hope. But you're no longer the Super Bowl contender you once thought you were. Like, that's out the window.
Yeah, and here's the thing about Zach Wilson, and I look, I really do feel for Jets fans, because you think of yourself in that position as a fan. They're talking themselves into, you know what, Zach Wilson's going to be fine. He's going to be okay. Did you see? I heard a lot of this today. Did you see how, in the offseason, remember I said going into Hard Knocks, like one of the things I was going to be looking for is how does Zach Wilson was the highly touted guy, the hot shot kid, and now all of a sudden, like, he has a horrible year. He loses his starting job. They bring in Rodgers. How does he handle that? So a lot of today, what I heard is, well, he's really matured. He's really, and I'm sure he has. Like, there was really nowhere to go but up for him last year. Not just the way he played, but the way he acted. I mean, he was just immature, and I've mentioned it many times. The soundbite when he turned the ball over 5 times and they lose a game that their defense played extraordinary in, and they asked him, was there anything you would do different? And he said no. And I'm like, well, that kind of just sealed your fate. Even Garrett Wilson, spoke up, and he was a rookie, for God's sake. Zach Wilson, he's matured and he's done all that stuff, and that's great. But now he's back. You're throwing him to the Wolves again. And you're throwing him to the Wolves with all these expectations. Like, he's got the physical talent. I mean, we've seen. That's why, again, Zach Wilson, as much as any other guy that we see, and I know Josh Allen the same thing, and he's panned out pretty well lately. Not well, but wow, look at that pro day. Remember Zach Wilson? Oh, look, he looks like Mahomes. Look at him roll to his left and throw sidearm and across his body. And well, you know what? When you get to the NFL, if you can't deal with pressure and you're not making quick reads and being able to process things in a very quick fashion and making the right decisions, you're going to get exposed. And Zach Wilson last year was exposed. Now, does he come out this year and now all of a sudden, well, hey, I don't think so. And like, to your point, we've heard everything. Call Phillip Rivers, who's probably in the process of making his 13th kid right now. Tom Brady. I don't know what they're going to do. But the bottom line is this. How can you think that the Jets, even with, a healthy Brees Hall, even with that great defense, you're not counting on Zach Wilson. And this is the one year that you need Aaron Rodgers, and he was going to be, they thought, that piece that at the very least, it wasn't that, the Jets are a runaway, forget about it, they're going to win the AFC East. Again, too tough to call, too tight for an entire that division, an entire conference. But now, and I know you're seeing these posts about Dorian Thompson-Robinson. We love DTR. This is not a matter of me saying, like, the Browns would never, ever give him up. I don't want to see them give him up, but why would anybody think that, like, he would then be able to just come in and he's a rookie, for God's sake, a promising rookie. But when Warren Sharp tweets that, maybe Shook was right. Maybe that was something for clickbait, because I was dumbfounded by that statement. Dumbfounded. All right, we will take a break. When we come back, we'll do a little fair or foul with Mr. Bombastic. It's Chico, the Chico Borman Show, right here on a Tuesday edition on Big Play Sports. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back. It is the Chico Borman Show on this Tuesday. Good to have you along on the Big Play Sports Network with you until 2 o'clock. And good stuff earlier today. If you're just tuning in, well, you can go back and check out the Bold Bald Breakdown. We debuted it today. Myself, Nick Shook of NFL.com and NFL Network did that from noon to 1, and we will do that each and every Tuesday from noon to 1 here on Big Play and the Chico Borman Show. And again, if you missed it, download the app on iTunes, the Chico Borman Show, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts and all that good stuff. And, of course, streaming live every day on iHeartRadio. All right, all that said, busy week ahead, getting ready for Monday Night Football following a big win over Joe Burrow and the Bengals. Right now, though, it's time for a little fair or foul.
All right, Chico. Well, I want to start things off with that Monday Night Football game from last night because I don't want to talk about the injury. Obviously, we just touched on that and everything, but there was a catch out of former Buckeye Garrett Wilson, right?
That was pretty.
It was
badass.
sensational. Okay, but what I want to play the clip of Joe Buck's call because this call changed my stance on Joe Buck as a broadcaster. So just take a listen.
Okay.
Garrett Wilson. Wow! What a catch! Touchdown, Jets! That kid's amazing. There is no way he caught that.
All right, Chico. So that is, to me, without a doubt, the most excited that I've ever heard Joe Buck.
You have okay. Foul. Forget. I'm glad that you're on board. People have this. This is one of my pet peeves. So don't take this personally, Bohm. It's aimed at a lot of people. Okay. Go back to 2016, all right? And, Joe Buck is rooting for the Cubs. He's not rooting for the Cubs. Okay, the Kyle Schwarber stuff, but, guys, he is as professional a broadcaster and as good a broadcaster as there is out there, okay? He's been doing – you don't just call as many Super Bowls, World Series, and prime time as long as he's been doing it if you're not. So, Boma, I'm glad that you're on board, and yes, but that's what he does each and every week. It's just people assume – and that's actually a testament to him, because if people assume that you're a fan of every fan base or every fan base but theirs, then that means that you're doing your job, because you're actually just very, very right down the middle. And he is. I mean, this is a guy that grew up on the Cardinals, and his father, Jack, and he is a great, great play-by-play announcer.
And Chico, just to clarify, I don't want to say that I hate Joe Buck. I think he's awesome. And I've heard him just talking, like in working with the Browns. I've heard him just talking with the broadcast booth off the air.
Admittedly, though, you said this changed my stance. So what?
Yeah,
changed?
he went up a notch in my book after that call because to me he was too monotone in his like broadcast. And the Cubs win the World Series. Like it was so monotone. It was very unenthusiastic. It was the anti-Gus Johnson.
You know what this is? Okay, and by the way, no offense to Gus, but Joe Buck is tenfold better than Gus.
There's a middle ground. That's all I'm saying.
Here's the thing with Buck. See, you're taking a narrative, and this happens a lot in sports. You're taking a narrative, and by the way, I love Gus, but Joe is like, he's at top of his game. You're taking a narrative that people have put out there that, oh, Joe he's either A, he's really biased and hates your squad, or B, he's not enthusiastic enough. And both couldn't be more false. It's just enough people say it, then people believe it, and that, like, it's stupid. I don't know why people love to hate announcers. There are some that I can't stand, don't get me wrong. But, like, he is one guy that gets one of the worst raps ever, and for no reason whatsoever. I think it's hilarious. Anyway.
Yeah, and I don't think that he's biased, and I'm not accusing him of that at all. But in my experience of watching him, he seems very unenthused for the big moments. And that's my personal impression from having seen him.
Yeah, you don't. Okay, one thing is too, you don't want to sound like he's
Gus Johnson.
He's gonna get excited when he needs to get excited. Go back and listen to Rajai Davis hitting that home run. Do you think he was like, here's the pitch from Chapman, and that ball is swung on, and it's a line drive over the left? No, he's going crazy. He's like, Rajai! But people are like, oh, he's rooting for the Cubs. Shut up. Well,
I never said he was.
It's a pet peeve. Well, but you're in that class where you think that he's bad and whatever.
I didn't say he was bad.
Yeah, you said it changed your stance.
It did.
You're not a big Joe Buck fan. You don't really. I don't think you've really listened to him enough. That's just my personal opinion.
Sure. Okay. Well, we move on now.
Yes.
Where CBS Sports released a list of their top 20 players in the NBA, and interestingly, I thought it was interesting at least. They ranked LeBron James at 12. Now ahead of him, notably, I'll just go down the list really quick: Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Damian Lillard, Jimmy Butler, Devin Booker, Jason Tatum, Joel Embiid, Kevin Durant, Luka Doncic, Steph Curry, Giannis, and Nikola Jokic at number 1, respectively. So, fair or foul, LeBron James is the 12th best player in the NBA.
Yeah, I mean, okay, I'm going to go fair only because, and everybody knows I'm a huge LeBron guy, but, like, this is not, if we're talking about career, of course not. If we're talking about right now, I mean, he's getting up there a little bit. Is he still a dominant player? Yeah, it's not a bad thing to be the 12th best. Bottom line is, I think he's in that conversation still at the ripe old age of 60 or whatever the hell he is as like a top 10 player. Here he's 12. Is that foul? No. Is it egregious? No. Could you make an argument top 10? Yes. So you got me fired up with this whole Buck thing, damn it. Like, I can't stand lazy narratives. And that's another one. LeBron's not a top 5 player. Well, he's not anymore. I mean, he was, and he is one of the best to ever do it. But now, no, he's not a top. I'm not saying you said he was a top 5 player, but go ahead.
All right, Chico.
Now, what do you want to? I'm on my front porch. I'm yelling at the clouds. What are you bringing to the table now?
Statement from Ted Ginn on Twitter where he said, Ted Ginn Jr., former Ohio State wide receiver, right? So obviously the Swamp Kings documentary came out talking about Florida, Urban Meyer, and that era surrounding the Gators. So Ted Ginn tweets out, quote, "If I didn't get hurt, we would have won this game," talking about the 2007 national title matchup against the Gators and the Buckeyes. Chico, that was kind of, they got their asses handed to them. Now, I love Teddy Ginn Jr. just as much as the next guy.
I'm so proud of you right now because I thought you would play the homer call. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, that's foul, right? It is foul.
Yeah, and I like you. I love Teddy Ginn. I remember being at a Buffalo Wild Wings in Pennsylvania when he did that, and I literally like fell off my. I was at a high top table, fell off my chair. People were going. I mean, it was crazy. But you're right. Very astutely, Bohm, you pointed out. I like to go back to that championship and then the LSU. That was really where I think the Big Ten realized because it wasn't that they had better skill guys and they were faster as far as the skill positions. That a lot of times back then, whenever you said, well, this team is just so lightning quick, immediately you just thought skill positions, wide out, your running backs, your DBs. Well, we've gotten to a point, and we did even back then, where guys are lightning quick and freakishly athletic on the line of scrimmage, offensive line, really on the defensive line. That's where you've seen it explode, and that's where Ohio State got their asses kicked. And every Big Ten and almost every program got their asses kicked by the SEC was that they didn't just have speedy skill guys. It was they had guys in the trenches and linebackers that were running 4.4s that weighed 230, 250 pounds. And then up front, they had 300-pounders that were as athletic as could be. So, yeah, you're right. I mean, that is extremely foul. I love Teddy Ginn, but no. Because they got absolutely hammered in the trenches that game.
Well, what a slap in the face that championship was.
It was a rude awakening.
That was the first time I ever cried to a sporting event. I think I've mentioned to you before.
You have. I forgot that it was 2007.
Yeah, it was heartbreaking. So I was 14 at the time.
Okay. I mean, I cried. I mean, the first sporting event that I mean, I cried at the Drive. I was there. That was tough. I'm trying to think before that. I don't think I was old enough. Like when Sipe got picked off in that playoff game against the Raiders, I was kind of too young, but I remember being around people that were crying. But yeah, go ahead. Go. I'm acting like you now.
Moving on from our tears, I guess I want to get into as a little bit of NBA action because Shams Charania with an interesting report on something the NBA is attempting to do to crack down on teams resting their star players.
A lot of NBA talk today, Bohm. Interesting. Okay, go ahead.
All right, well, so he's saying that the NBA Board of Governors is expected to vote this week on a new policy that a team is unable to rest two star players in the same game. Chico, fair or foul, I don't think that this could be actually enforced.
You're on it today, by the way. Yeah, great. I'm serious. You're on it. That's exactly right. Bohm's saying, what does that mean? I'm normally not? No, not at all. But I'm saying you're especially on it today.
I had to bring my A game big shoes to fill after that bold ball breakdown.
Yeah, how the hell do you enforce that? Now, I understand what the NBA is trying to do, but this is a case, and this gets on my nerves a lot of times with commissioners, but the horse is already not only out of the barn, it's sprinting across the state line somewhere, and now the commissioner of the NBA, because it's all about their stars, and that's great, and they market their stars and great. But they allowed it's a player-driven league, and part of that is this whole we're going to do what we want. You're not going to be able to put the toothpaste back in the tube. It ain't going to happen. And to your point, yeah, how do you enforce that? This guy has his ankle sore. He doesn't want to get. I don't believe you. We need you to get out there. Okay, I'm not going how stupid is this? Board of Governors. The NBA, who's on the NBA Board of Governors? Is it the character that plays Jerry West in Winning Time that acts like a raging lunatic, which is not Jerry West, the real person? Is that who's on the Board of Governors? This Board of Water Buffaloes is coming to meet, and we want to vote. Shut up. It's so stupid.
I just imagine like the NBA sending out independent doctors to examine the injuries listed on injury reports. Like major picking of nits occurring, Chico.
Yes. I mean, again, I have the flu bug. What are you gonna take his temperature? Well, maybe I'm not running a fever, but I
took some Motrin. I'm keeping the fever down.
It's a stomach issue. Well, we're going to have to go back and view that stall to make sure. I mean, this is so stupid. It's so dumb. Anyway, go ahead.
Well, Chico, we touched on Monday Night Football, obviously that Aaron Rodgers injury, which was, you hate to see that. You know, so much buzz surrounding the Jets team this season. Really thought they were going to be a contender. And with that, interesting report leaking courtesy of Diana Rossini, who said that Aaron Rodgers had expressed to the Jets coaches that he doesn't like the play calls involving cut blocks because he can't extend the play and it forces him to get rid of the ball quickly. Now, in the limited 4 dropbacks that we saw out of Aaron Rodgers, there were 2 of them that were calling for those cutbacks, and one of them, the first one was a throwaway, and then the second one led to the injury when Leonard Floyd was, I guess, he was cut blocked, but he still was able to pressure Rodgers, and that all culminated at the end to early in the game.
Mm-hmm.
Fair or foul, do you think that this is a frustration that Aaron Rodgers might have leaked to Diana himself out of, I guess, just the way that everything kind of fell apart this season for the Jets?
Like blaming the
Do you think Aaron Rodgers is throwing blame here, or this is coming from elsewhere?
Real quick, did he blamed a teammate, or was talking to Turk?
He said he had expressed to coaches that he didn't like those play calls.
Oh, well, okay. Here's what I would say, and I'm sorry. I was reading a tweet and I wasn't paying attention, and I deserve to be yelled at for that.
It happens.
Here's what I would say about the Aaron Rodgers play. One, I don't even know if that was a play call per se, because he got back there in a hurry. Yeah, I mean, he's frustrated. Aaron Rodgers does that. Here's where this is going to go, and it's already gone there, is the turf. That turf, and listen, I'm not sitting here saying that, well, if it's grass, he's not hurt. I know it's football. But it's also not like, and this is what the NFL is going to have to investigate. They have had so many complaints about that field turf at MetLife Stadium. Like, every player has been, and it's been going on for years. Here's the problem, though. You say, well, you got to go to grass. Do you know, and I didn't realize this until today, did you know that there was a concert on Thursday? There was a concert on Friday. There was the Giants getting absolutely lambasted against the Cowboys, and then that game last night. You can't have that if that's grass, obviously. But here's the thing. Are you going to say, you know what? We got to build grass because, players are getting hurt? Or are you going to say, I'm stepping away from sports for a second, but Bruce Springsteen, we can't schedule him for his yearly concert because no way. And I'm not saying it's an easy call, but I think everybody just assumes like, you got to have grass. Well, yeah, but think of how much money the NFL and the city, we all know it. It's all about this, and that's what they're going to have to make the decision on. But, yeah, I found that interesting. I didn't know. They had a concert Thursday night, Friday night, and then Sunday was the Giants game, and then last night.
And perhaps more teams should follow the example of the Arizona Cardinals, who, with their field, I feel like you don't really say that a lot with the Arizona Cardinals, but
yeah.
The way that they grow that grass naturally, and then like they move it out when there's not games, and they can have events, and none of it is on top of the grass, none of it is ruining the field.
And I'm sure some of that. That's a great point. I do wonder. I know Arizona is not, it's super hot out, but does that help that climate? Because again, to relate it back to here, where people say, "Oh, you gotta have the turf," you gotta have a dome. I'm not saying I'm completely against it. I just don't think people really think things through a lot. And yes, you could make a lot of money, but and it's all-year facility, concerts, and I'm all about that. At the same time, you're going to get the same gripes. But this is where with MetLife, Bohm, it has been field turf has gotten criticized all over the place, but MetLife has really players, coaches, different sports, soccer players, everybody said, like, this turf sucks. I don't know what they did or what they didn't do or buy or what, but it's bad, and that's just one more example, and unfortunately for Jets fans, a really tough example to have.
Yeah, and certainly have to wonder if this blowback might influence them to make any adaptations, but at this point, I don't know if it will.
Yeah.
Anyways, I digress. Let's move on. I want to get to interview that New Browns defensive lineman Shelby Harris gave with Ross Tucker, where he talked about Myles Garrett, and he had some very, very high praise for him. Take a listen.
Comparison. I literally was telling my wife's like, I never heard you talk about another player like this. I was like, he's the best player I've ever seen. Like by far, and I play with Vaughn, and it's just I play with Chubb, and I've played with Justin Tuck and Lamar Woodley, Khalil. Me and Khalil were the same draft class and everything. I'll tell you this: to be able to move the way he does, and to be 6'5", 270, it's unfair. And the guy, you never see him really lose a rush.
Yeah, so that was Shelby Harris on his new teammate Myles Garrett. And the reason that I bring this clip up, obviously, the talent is undeniable. One of the best pass rushers in the league. Still has not won a Defensive Player of the Year award. And there's all kinds of different reasons why that may have been. In some years, maybe it was just the sheer dominance of like an Aaron Donald. Other years, maybe he's missed time due to injury.
Or his team's been really bad.
Yeah, or the team being really bad.
Yeah.
Fair or foul, Chico, Myles Garrett will get a Defensive Player of the Year award by the time his career ends.
I'm going to go fair on that, and it's a little bit of a homer call, but I'll say it happens this year. This guy, and honestly, the word freak, the term freak, is thrown around a lot. Nick Bosa's a freak. Micah Parsons is a freak, and it's all true. I have never seen anyone, though, and I'm not saying Bosa can't or to this, but like I've never seen anyone bend like Myles Garrett does. That I know I say this all the time, but like you can push him out, like you can. Well, okay, we're gonna push him out. We're gonna go wide, and he's not gonna be able to get to the edge. He's not gonna be able to get. And his bend, like he gets down near a guy's ankle and goes by him. Somebody 5'9", 150 can't do that. This guy is 6'4", 270, 80, whatever, and does that. He is a different cat. And again, it's not to say he's better than Bosa or better than TJ Watt. I can't say who's the best. But I know that human beings, great athlete human beings, cannot do that. That's like you don't have that kind of balance and agility and bend at that size. He's the only guy I know that can do that. He's amazing.
So is it fair or foul then to say, Chico, that you would take Myles Garrett over any of those guys listed in their primes? Von Miller, Khalil Mack, Justin Tuck. He mentioned Lamar Woodley,
Those guys, yes.
Is there anyone you would take over Myles Garrett?
If we're going, Reggie White to me is still the best. Reggie, and this isn't like just my eyeballs. Like you go on what offensive linemen say, and you're talking like. Joe Thomas has talked about it, even though I know he didn't go up against him. But, like, you hear offensive linemen that were Anthony Munoz, guys that were the best of their generation, say he could. The combination of bull rush and then speed, nobody matched him. I think Reggie White is the best of all time. Bruce Smith, I saw a lot of in Buffalo. He was incredible.
Lawrence Taylor?
Of those names Lawrence Taylor, again, more of a hybrid. If you're just going to say pass rusher, put it this way, Joe Gibbs invented the H-back because of that hybrid, that Clint Didier was his like hybrid guy to block Lawrence Taylor and to match up with Lawrence Taylor or try to. So when a position has to be invented because you are so dominant, that says a lot. But I mean, if you're going like hand in the dirt pass rusher, I'll put it this way, the guys that you mentioned, I'd put Myles Garrett against those guys, any of them. But man, I still say Reggie White, and I'm just going on what all-timers say at the offensive tackle position, that he was just, at times, you couldn't do anything about him.
Well, Chico, that'll do it for today's edition of Fair or Foul.
That will do it for today's edition of Fair or Foul, and that's going to do it for this edition of the Chico Borman Show on this Tuesday. Boy, we had a lot going on today. We had the debut of the bold, bald
breakdown.
Yes. Oh, I wanted to see if you were paying attention, because
I wasn't sure if you forgot the word.
No. I mean,
for a second I thought bald predictions, but then I was like, no, wait. It's a breakdown.
Admittedly, I almost said prediction. Oh,
yeah,
man.
it's bold predictions.
Bald breakdown, and it really is. Today, Nick Shook and I, we broke it down from Sunday's game. But I like the fact we had, he threw out numbers to you. He gave you the breakdown of the Niners and what they did against the Steelers, what the Browns might be able to incorporate. And we're going to do that each and every Tuesday. Every Tuesday, beginning at noon, right here on the Chico Borman Show and the Big Play Sports Network. Again, the bold breakdown. Why is it that I can effortlessly say it during the show, but then when I'm just trying to give just a promo at the very end, I can't say it?
Let's hope we don't have a case of the yips on our hands, Chico.
All right, that was good, Bohm. I like that. I like your T-shirt today. I hope it brightens your mood.
Thank you.
You're my guy, Bohm. For Michael Bohm and Nick Shook, all of us here at Big Play Sports, we're going to do this all again tomorrow beginning at noon. But we're also going to work in some baseball because, hey, that season isn't over yet, and it is getting pretty fun. The George Kirby, you mentioned that George Kirby thing yesterday on Fair or Foul. We're going to ask Brett Boone, the former All-Star second baseman. He joins us each and every Wednesday. We'll talk to him about that and the latest Guardians news, and it hasn't been too good. All of that coming your way tomorrow at noon. Don't forget Matt Fontana tomorrow at 9, and wherever you get your podcast, stream us here on Big Play Sports. I'm Mike Chico Borman. Make it a good rest of your Tuesday, everybody. See you.